The Seattle rain drummed against the windows of Pike Street Cafe, creating a melancholic symphony that matched Stella Monroe's mood perfectly. She stood in the doorway, her honey-colored hair dripping onto her shoulders, clutching a weathered, leather suitcase that contained everything she now owned. The cafe buzzed with the afternoon crowd, every table occupied by people sharing intimate conversations or tapping away at laptops. Every table except one. A man in an impeccably tailored, charcoal suit sat alone, his steel blue eyes fixed on a laptop screen, an untouched cup of black coffee cooling beside him. Something about his rigid posture and the invisible wall he seemed to have built around himself made other patrons unconsciously avoid the empty chair across from him. Stella hesitated, twisting a strand of her wavy hair between her fingers, a nervous habit she'd never managed to break. The alternative was standing there looking like a drowned cat or heading back into the downpour. With a deep breath that did little to steady her nerves, she approached his table. "Excuse me," she said, her voice barely audible above the cafe's ambient noise. "Would you mind if I—" She gestured to the empty chair. The man looked up, his expression unreadable. For a moment he simply studied her, taking in her rain-soaked appearance and the suitcase at her feet. "You can sit," he finally said, his voice deep and measured, "if you'll remain quiet." Stella couldn't help but smile slightly at his bluntness. "Thank you." She slid into the chair, tucking her suitcase beneath the table. A waitress appeared almost immediately, and Stella ordered a chamomile tea, hoping it might calm her frayed nerves. The man returned to his work, fingers moving efficiently across the keyboard. Stella found herself studying him surreptitiously over the rim of her teacup when it arrived. He was older than she'd initially thought, probably in his late 30s, with dark brown hair that was beginning to gray at the temples. His features were classical, almost aristocratic, but there was tension in the set of his jaw, as if he carried the weight of decisions that kept him awake at night. "The silent arrangement isn't working if you're going to stare," he said without looking up. Heat crept into Stella's cheeks. "I'm sorry, it's just, do you ever feel like your entire life can change in 24 hours? Like everything you thought was solid just dissolves?" His fingers stilled over the keyboard. He looked up, really looking at her for the first time, and something in his expression shifted. Perhaps he recognized the raw pain in her voice, or maybe something in her words echoed his own experiences. He closed his laptop. "Bennett Hawthorne," he said, extending his hand across the table. "Stella Monroe." Her hand felt small in his, but his grip was gentle despite his imposing presence. "So, Ms. Monroe, what dissolved?" The question was direct, almost clinical, but his eyes held an understanding that made Stella's carefully constructed walls begin to crumble. "My marriage, my home, my entire life, really." She traced the rim of her teacup with her finger. "I came home early from a business trip to surprise my husband. Turns out the surprise was on me." Bennett's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. He reached for his coffee, seemed to remember it was cold, and set it back down. "He chose poorly," he said simply. A surprised laugh escaped Stella's lips. "That's not the typical 'I'm sorry' or 'men are trash' response I've been getting. I don't deal in platitudes." He glanced at her suitcase. "Do you have somewhere to go?" Stella's fingers found her hair again. "A hotel for now, until I figure out my next move." She didn't mention that her credit card was already dangerously close to its limit, or that the thought of job hunting while emotionally shattered terrified her. Bennett pulled out his wallet and extracted a business card. The cream-colored card was elegant in its simplicity. Bennett Hawthorne, Chief Executive Officer, Hawthorne Investments. He wrote something on the back before sliding it across the table. "My private number," he said, noticing her questioning look. "If you need anything, resources, contacts, references, call me." "Why would you help a stranger?" He was quiet for a long moment, his fingers drumming once on the table. The first nervous gesture she'd seen from him, because 8 years ago I sat in this very cafe looking like I had all the answers while my world was collapsing around me. Sometimes, Ms. Monroe, the kindness of strangers is the only thing that keeps us afloat. The rain continued its steady rhythm against the windows, but inside the cafe something had shifted. Two broken people, separated by circumstances and personality, had found an unexpected moment of connection over cooling drinks and shared pain. "Thank you," Stella said softly, tucking the card into her jacket pocket. She could feel its weight there like a talisman against uncertainty. Bennett reopened his laptop, but before returning to his work, he caught her eye one last time. "Next time, order the vanilla latte. Their chamomile tea is terrible." A genuine smile tugged at Stella's lips. "I thought you were all about the black coffee." "I contain multitudes," he said dryly, but there was a hint of warmth in his eyes that hadn't been there before. The rest of the afternoon passed in comfortable silence. Stella pulled out her worn notebook, the one constant companion through her turbulent marriage, and began to write. Occasionally, she would glance up to find Bennett looking at her, his expression thoughtful, before he quickly returned to his work. As the cafe began to empty and the rain finally ceased, Stella gathered her things. "Thank you for sharing your table, Mr. Hawthorne." "Bennett," he corrected, standing as she rose. "And Ms. Monroe?" She paused, suitcase in hand. "Next time you need a quiet place to write, this table is usually empty around 3. Stella nodded, understanding the unspoken invitation. As she stepped out into the damp Seattle evening, she felt something she hadn't expected to feel, that morning hope. Not the bright, burning kind that comes with grand promises and sweeping gestures, but something quieter and more substantial, like the first warm ray of sun after a storm. She didn't know it then, but that rainy afternoon in Pike Street Cafe would become the first chapter of a story neither of them had expected to write. 3 days after their chance encounter at Pike Street Cafe, Bennett Hawthorne found himself walking down Pioneer Square's cobblestone streets. The morning fog had lifted, but Seattle's perpetual gray still hung low over the city's historic district. He wasn't supposed to be here. His schedule was meticulously planned, and this detour would make him late for his 10 a.m. meeting. Yet something had drawn him to take the longer route to his office. That's when he saw her. Stella Monroe stood outside Winston & Co. Jewelers, her honey-colored hair caught in the breeze. She wore a simple linen dress under a navy cardigan, professional but somehow lost-looking, like someone trying to maintain the appearance of control while everything crumbled beneath the surface. Bennett recognized that look. He'd worn it himself, often enough. He watched as she pulled something from her purse, a ring that caught the weak morning light. Even from a distance, he could see her fingers trembling. Before he could think better of it, Bennett was crossing the street. "The morning rate for gold is down," he said, coming to stand beside her. "You'll get barely half what it's worth." Stella startled, nearly dropping the ring. "Mr. Hawthorne, Bennett, I—" She straightened her shoulders, pride warring with embarrassment on her face. "Are you following me?" "Hardly. My office is 3 blocks away." He nodded toward the ring. "Family heirloom? Wedding ring?" Her laugh was hollow. "Apparently it's bad luck to keep jewelry from failed marriages." Bennett's fingers did their characteristic snap and drum against his thigh as he considered his next words carefully. "There's a better jeweler in Belltown. They'll give you a fairer price at least." "I don't have time for fair." Stella's voice cracked slightly. "The hotel wants payment by noon and I—" She stopped, pressing her lips together. "I'm fine, I'll figure it out." Bennett studied her for a long moment. She had shadows under her eyes that hadn't been there 3 days ago, but her spine was straight, her chin lifted. Proud, even in defeat. It stirred something in him he thought he'd buried years ago after Rachel's death. "I have a proposition for you," he said, surprising himself. Stella's eyebrows rose. "Mr. Hawthorne, if this is some kind of— not that kind of proposition." He almost smiled at her defensive tone. "I have a guest house. It's sitting empty, has its own entrance, and it's furnished. You can stay there while you get back on your feet." "Why would you offer that to a stranger?" "We're not strangers. We shared a table." This time he did smile slightly. Besides, you broke my silence rule and the world didn't end. That has to count for something. Stella wrapped her arms around herself, studying him with those expressive brown eyes. And what would you want in return? Nothing. At her skeptical look, he added, Actually, that's not true. There is one condition. Here it comes, she muttered. Don't sell the ring. Not today, not like this. Whatever it's not worth your dignity. Stella's breath caught. She looked down at the ring in her hand, then back at Bennett. I can't accept charity. It's not charity, it's... He paused, searching for the right words. Consider it an investment in human potential. 3 months, no rent. Use the time to find a job, an apartment, whatever you need. After that, if you want to stay, we can discuss reasonable rent. That's incredibly generous, but... Ms. Monroe. Bennett's voice was gentle but firm. Sometimes, the bravest thing we can do is accept help when it's offered. A taxi honked nearby, making them both jump. The spell of the moment broken, Bennett reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. I have a meeting in 20 minutes. Take the day to think about it. He typed something and her phone buzzed. I've sent you my address. The guest house code is 1919. Use it or don't. Your choice. He turned to leave, then paused. And Ms. Monroe? Keep the ring. Not because it means anything, but because one day you'll want to remember that you were strong enough to walk away. With that, he strode away, his tall figure soon disappearing around the corner, leaving Stella standing on the sidewalk, clutching her ring and his address, wondering if fairy tales sometimes started with kind strangers instead of cruel stepmothers. The guest house, as it turned out, was larger than Stella's first apartment. She stood in the entrance at dusk, her suitcase still by the door, taking in the space. Modern furnishings in shades of gray, and blue filled the open-plan living area. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked a small but immaculate garden. Everything was pristine, tasteful, and completely impersonal, like a high-end hotel suite waiting for its first guest. She'd spent hours debating whether to come. Pride had warred with practicality, and practicality had finally won. But standing here now, she felt like an intruder in someone else's life. A knock at the door made her jump. Bennett stood there, his suit jacket gone, shirt sleeves rolled up to his elbows. He held a bottle of wine in one hand and 2 glasses in the other. I thought we should discuss house rules, he said, holding up the wine. Unless you'd prefer coffee? Stella felt herself relax slightly. Wine sounds perfect, actually. He stepped inside, his presence somehow making the space feel less intimidating. The main house is through the garden path. I'm usually home by 7, out by 8. The housekeeper comes on Tuesdays. Her name is Rosa, and she's worked for me for 6 years. She's discreet. He moved to the kitchen area, opening drawers until he found the corkscrew. The domestic normality of the action struck Stella as oddly endearing. The gate code changes monthly. I'll make sure you have it. The Wi-Fi password is on the fridge, and... He poured the wine with practiced ease. I don't entertain much, but when I do, I'll give you advance notice. The garden is shared space, but it's yours to use whenever you like. Stella accepted the glass he offered. These don't sound like rules so much as courtesies. The only real rule is this. Don't feel obligated to explain yourself to me. Your life is your own. I'm just... He paused, taking a sip of wine. Consider me a friendly neighbor who happens to own your building. A friendly neighbor who serves excellent wine to strangers he takes in off the street. She raised an eyebrow, trying to lighten the moment. Chateau Margaux 2015, and you're hardly off the street. You're a businesswoman in transition. His tone was serious, but there was a warmth in his eyes that made Stella's chest tight with unexpected emotion. Thank you, she said softly. Not just for this, but for seeing me. Really seeing me. When I felt invisible. Bennett's fingers tapped against his glass once, twice. Sometimes, he said carefully, the people who seem the most put together are the ones who need someone to really look at them. They stood in comfortable silence, sipping wine and watching the last light fade from the garden. Finally, Bennett set his glass down. I should let you settle in. The kitchen is stocked. With basics, if you need anything. He trailed off. I'll figure it out, Stella finished for him. I'm good at that. He nodded, moving toward the door. Good night, Ms. Monroe. Stella, she corrected. If we're going to be neighbors, you should use my first name. He paused in the doorway, a slight smile touching his lips. Good night, Stella. After he left, Stella walked through the guest house again, this time really looking at it. The furniture was expensive but chosen for comfort as much as style. The kitchen was indeed well stocked, not just with basics but with good coffee, various teas, and even fresh fruit. In the bedroom she found fluffy towels and high thread count sheets. Everything spoke of thought and care, not just wealth. It made her wonder about the man who lived in the main house, who offered help to strangers and served them expensive wine, yet seemed so carefully distant. Opening her suitcase, she pulled out her notebook and settled onto the window seat overlooking the garden. The moon was rising, casting silver light over the carefully tended flowers. She began to write. Sometimes help comes disguised as a businessman, in a perfect suit. Sometimes home is a guest house belonging to a stranger. And sometimes, just sometimes, rock bottom has a door code and comes with a very good bottle of wine. Outside, a light went on in the main house, and she could see Bennett's silhouette moving past a window. Her mysterious benefactor, her friendly neighbor. The man who'd seen through her brave face to the truth beneath. Stella touched the ring in her pocket, then pulled it out and set it on the windowsill. Not to keep, but to remind herself that endings could also be beginnings. That sometimes the kindness of strangers could be stronger than the cruelty of those who were supposed to love us. She had 3 months to rebuild her life. 3 months in this beautiful borrowed space. 3 months to figure out who Stella Monroe was without the labels of wife or victim. And somewhere in the back of her mind, a small voice whispered that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't the only one who needed saving. 2 weeks into her stay at the guest house, Stella discovered something unexpected about Bennett Hawthorne. He was a creature of precise habits. Every morning at exactly 6:45 a.m., she would hear the soft whir of his coffee grinder. By 7:15, he would be in the garden, coffee in hand, checking his emails on his phone. He always paused at the rose bushes, touching a particular white bloom, with surprising gentleness before continuing his routine. This morning, she decided to break pattern. The roses seem to be your favorite, she said, stepping out onto her small patio with her own cup of coffee. The morning air was crisp, carrying the promise of autumn. Bennett didn't startle. She was beginning to think nothing could shake his composure, but his fingers did their characteristic snap before he turned to face her. They were my sister's favorite, actually. Rachel insisted on planting them herself. It was the first time he'd mentioned a sister. The past tense in his voice told its own story. Tell me about her, Stella ventured, settling into one of the garden chairs. For a moment she thought he would retreat behind his usual wall of polite distance. Instead, he surprised her by taking the seat across from her. She was unexpected, like sunshine, breaking through Seattle clouds. His voice carried a warmth she'd never heard before. She used to say that gardens need both rain and sun to grow, that people do too. She sounds wise. She was 19 when we lost her. Car accident. His fingers tapped against his coffee cup. I was supposed to pick her up that night, but I had an important meeting. She took a taxi instead. Bennett, I'm so sorry. It was 8 years ago. He said it like a fact, not a comfort. The roses helped me remember her laugh. Stella reached across the space between them, touching his hand briefly. He stiffened but didn't pull away. Thank you for sharing that with me. His eyes met hers, and something shifted in their blue-gray depths. How are the job applications going? The abrupt change of subject might have hurt if she hadn't caught the slight tremor in his voice. This was a man unused to sharing personal pain. 3 interviews this week, she said, allowing him his retreat. 2 marketing firms and 1 publishing house. Publishing? His eyebrow raised slightly. I didn't know you were interested in That field. Stella touched the notebook that was never far from her side. I used to write. Before marriage, before trying to fit myself into someone else's idea of success. She laughed softly. My ex-husband called it a hobby. Said I needed to focus on real work. What do you write? Stories about people finding their way back to themselves. She hadn't meant to be quite so honest. The morning air, the roses, his rare moment of vulnerability, it all made her brave. I have a half-finished novel in this notebook. It's probably terrible. I doubt that. The simple confidence in his voice made her chest tight. A comfortable silence fell between them, broken only by the morning birds and the distant sound of the city waking up. Stella found herself studying Bennett's profile as he gazed at the roses. In these unguarded moments, when his CEO mask slipped, she could see flashes of a different man, one who remembered to water his sister's roses and listen to strangers in cafes. I should head to the office, he said finally, standing. But instead of leaving immediately as he usually did, he hesitated. Would you like to have dinner tonight, to discuss your interviews? Stella felt her heart skip. You don't have to do that. I know. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. But I'd like to. Then yes, she said, trying to ignore the warmth spreading through her chest. I'd like that too. He nodded once, then headed inside to finish preparing for work. Stella remained in the garden, her coffee growing cold as she watched the morning light play across the roses. That evening, Stella found herself standing in front of her closet feeling ridiculously nervous. It's just dinner, she told herself. With her landlord. Her incredibly handsome, unexpectedly kind landlord, who served expensive wine and remembered how she took her coffee. She finally settled on a simple black dress that made her feel elegant without trying too hard. As she applied a touch of mascara, her eyes caught the subtle tattoo on her ribs in the mirror. Grow through what you go through. The words gave her courage. At precisely 7:30, she made her way through the garden to the main house. The evening was mild, and the garden lights cast a soft glow over the path. Bennett opened the door before she could knock, and for a moment, they both seemed startled by each other. He'd changed from his usual suit into dark jeans and a gray cashmere sweater that made his eyes look almost silver. The casual attire somehow made him more approachable, more real. You look lovely, he said quietly, stepping aside to let her in. The main house was exactly what she'd expected, tastefully decorated in shades of gray and blue, everything in perfect order. But there were surprises too. A well-worn leather armchair that didn't match the modern decor, shelves of vinyl, records, and most surprisingly, a piano in the corner. You play? She asked, nodding toward the instrument. Badly, he admitted, leading her to the kitchen. Another thing Rachel insisted on. She said every home needs music, even if it's just scales practiced poorly. The kitchen island was set, for two, with wine already breathing in crystal decanters. Something that smelled amazing simmered on the stove. You cook? Stella couldn't keep the surprise from her voice. Don't sound so shocked. There was that ghost of a smile again. I find it meditative, like gardening but with more immediate results. As they settled into dinner, a perfectly prepared coq au vin, Stella found herself relaxing. Bennett was an attentive listener as she described her interviews, offering insights without being prescriptive. When she mentioned the publishing, House was her favorite despite offering the lowest salary. Something in his expression softened. You light up when you talk about writing, he observed, pouring more wine. Why did you stop? Stella traced the rim of her glass, thinking. I guess I started believing what I was told, that it wasn't practical, that I was chasing dreams instead of building a future. She took a sip of wine. It's strange how we can lose ourselves so gradually we don't even notice it happening, until we wake up one day and don't recognize our own reflection, Bennett finished softly. Their eyes met across the table, and Stella felt that now familiar tug in her chest. Here was someone who understood, not just the pain of loss, but the slow erosion of self that came from trying to be what others needed. "May I read it?" he asked suddenly. At her confused look, he added, "Your novel. The one in your notebook." Stella felt her cheeks warm. "It's not finished." "Neither are we," he said simply. "That doesn't make the story less worth telling." Later, as they shared dessert, a dark chocolate mousse that Bennett claimed came from a local patisserie, but had definitely been homemade, Stella found herself thinking about beginnings and endings, how sometimes they looked exactly the same from different angles. "Thank you," she said as the evening wound down. "Not just for dinner, but for seeing me, the real me." Bennett walked her to the door, his hand hovering near but not quite, touching the small of her back. At the threshold, he paused. "Stella?" She turned, and for a moment the air between them felt charged with possibility. "Take the publishing house job," he said softly. "Build the life you want, not the one someone else thinks you should have." Walking back to the guest house under the stars, Stella felt something shift inside her, like a key turning in a lock she hadn't known was there. In her notebook that night, she wrote, "Sometimes healing doesn't look like we expect. Sometimes it looks like roses in the morning light, like perfectly cooked French cuisine, like a man who listens to the words we don't say. Sometimes it looks like coming home to yourself, in a place you never expected to find it." In the main house, a soft melody drifted through the evening air. Scales practiced slowly, carefully, like someone learning to trust their own hands again. A month into her stay at the guest house, Stella and Bennett had fallen into an easy rhythm neither of them had planned. Their morning coffee conversations in the garden had become a ritual, stretching longer each day. Sometimes they talked about work. Her new job at Riverside Publishing was challenging but fulfilling. Sometimes they sat in comfortable silence, watching the sunrise paint the sky in watercolor hues. But it was their Friday nights that had become something special. It started accidentally. One rainy evening, Bennett had knocked on her door with a bottle of wine and a concerned expression. "Rosa mentioned you've been skipping lunch." Stella had been deep in manuscript edits, her hair twisted into a messy bun, wearing her most comfortable sweater. "I've been busy," she said, unconsciously touching the tips of her hair, a nervous habit that Bennett had come to recognize. "You need to eat." He held up a bag from Pike Place Market. "I thought we could cook together." That first night had turned into a tradition. Now, every Friday, they would cook together in his kitchen, trading stories and comfortable silences over chopping boards and simmering pots. Tonight was no different. Stella watched as Bennett moved around his kitchen with practiced ease, his sleeves rolled up, tie long discarded. Classical music played softly in the background, another surprise she'd discovered about him. He preferred Bach when cooking, Chopin when working. "You're staring," he said without looking up from the vegetables he was chopping. "I'm observing," she corrected, hiding her smile as she continued kneading the pasta dough. "There's a difference." "And what are you observing, Ms. Monroe?" His voice carried that slight warmth it seemed to reserve only for her. "That you're happier when you're cooking, more yourself." She shaped the dough into a ball, setting it aside to rest. "Like the suit and tie are a costume you wear for the world, but this—" She gestured to him, flour-dusted and relaxed. "This is the real Bennett Hawthorne." He stilled for a moment, then resumed chopping. "Perhaps you're right." His fingers did their characteristic snap before he continued. "Or perhaps this is just another role I play." "No," Stella said softly, moving to wash her hands at the sink beside him. "When you're being someone else, your shoulders tense, your jaw tightens. But here—" She reached up without thinking, brushing a bit of flour from his cheek. "Here you're just you." The moment stretched between them, charged with possibility. Bennett turned slightly, and suddenly they were standing very close, the running water forgotten. His eyes searched her face, and Stella felt her heart beating against her, ribs like a trapped bird. The timer for the oven chimed, breaking the spell. They moved apart, each returning to their tasks. but something had shifted in the air between them. The casual touches that had become natural, a hand at an elbow, fingers brushing while passing ingredients, now carried a new weight of meaning. As they sat down to eat, Stella noticed Bennett watching her take her first bite of the handmade pasta. "This is amazing," she said honestly. "It's your recipe," he reminded her. "From your grandmother?" The fact that he remembered that detail from a conversation weeks ago made her chest tight. Yes, though she never used truffles. Improvements can be made on classics. His slight smile carried a hint of mischief that few people ever saw. After dinner, they moved to the living room with their wine. This too had become part of their routine. These quiet moments where the rest of the world seemed to fade away. "I finished reading your novel," Bennett said suddenly. Stella nearly choked on her wine. She'd given him her notebook 2 weeks ago after much persuasion, but they hadn't discussed it. And it's beautiful. His voice was soft but firm. The way you write about second chances, about finding yourself in the spaces between who you were and who you're becoming. He paused, his fingers doing their nervous tap against his thigh. "It's honest, raw, real." "It's unfinished," she whispered. "Then finish it." He turned to face her fully on the couch. "Stop hiding your light, Stella. The world needs your words." Maybe it was the wine, or the way he said her name, or the fact that he was the first person who had ever truly believed in her writing. Whatever it was, Stella felt tears prick at her eyes. Bennett reached out, catching a tear with his thumb before it could fall. The touch was gentle, almost reverent. "Don't cry," he said softly, "unless they're good tears." "They're confused tears," she admitted with a watery laugh. "I'm not used to people seeing me, really seeing me." "I see you," he said simply. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. Stella was acutely aware of how close they were sitting, how his hand had moved to rest lightly on her shoulder, how the lamplight caught the silver at his temples. "Bennett," she breathed, hardly aware she'd spoken. He leaned forward slightly, then stopped himself. "We shouldn't," he said, but his voice was rough with emotion. "Why not?" "Because you're vulnerable. Because I'm your landlord. Because—" He broke off as Stella placed her fingers against his lips. "Those are excuses," she said softly. "Not reasons." For a long moment, he just looked at her, his eyes filled with a war between desire and restraint. Then, slowly, deliberately, he took her hand from his lips and pressed a kiss to her palm. The gesture was so unexpectedly tender that Stella felt her breath catch. "Tell me the real reason," she whispered. "Because," he said, his voice barely audible, "I'm afraid of how much I want this. Want you." The confession hung between them like a suspended note in one of his piano pieces. Stella could see the cost it had taken him to admit it, this man who held himself so carefully apart from the world. She moved closer until their foreheads were almost touching. "Being afraid of wanting something doesn't make it wrong," she said softly. "Sometimes it just means it matters." His hand came up to cup her cheek, and this time when he leaned in, he didn't stop. The kiss was gentle at first, a question more than a demand, but when Stella's fingers threaded through his hair, drawing him closer, it deepened into something more urgent, more honest. When they finally broke apart, both slightly breathless, Bennett rested his forehead against hers. "Stay," he whispered. "Not in the guest house, here with me." "Bennett, not because you need a place to stay," he continued quickly, "but because I need you here. Because this house hasn't felt like home since Rachel died. But when you're in it—" He took a shaky breath. "When you're here, everything feels right again." Stella pulled back slightly to look at him, seeing all the vulnerability he usually kept hidden. "Are you sure?" His answer was to kiss her again, and this time there was nothing hesitant about it. This kiss held promises, possibilities, the weight of two broken people choosing to be brave together. Later that night, as they lay tangled in his sheets, Stella traced patterns on his chest while he played with her hair. "What are you thinking?" she asked. Bennett was quiet for a moment. "I'm thinking that sometimes the best things in life come disguised as accidents, like strangers sharing coffee on rainy days." Stella smiled, pressing a kiss to his shoulder. "Or like finding home in someone else's guest house." "No," he said softly, tilting her chin up to look at him. "Like finding home in someone else's heart." Outside, the Seattle rain began to fall, a gentle backdrop to their newfound intimacy. In the garden, Rachel's roses swayed in the night breeze, as if approving of this unexpected love story blooming in their midst. The morning sun filtered through Bennett's bedroom windows, casting golden light across rumpled sheets. Stella woke to the unfamiliar weight of his arm around her waist, his breath warm against her neck. For a moment she held perfectly still, absorbing the peaceful intimacy of the moment. 2 weeks had passed since their first kiss, since she'd moved from the guest house into his home. 2 weeks of discovering each other's rhythms, of learning the language of touch and silence that existed between them. But with this new intimacy came the shadows of their past lives, creeping in during quiet moments. Bennett stirred behind her, pressing a kiss to her shoulder. "You're thinking too loudly," he murmured. "Sorry," she said, turning to face him. In these early morning moments, he looked softer, the usual sharp edges of his CEO persona blurred by sleep and intimacy. "It's just, sometimes this feels too good to be real." His fingers traced her spine, a gesture that had become comfortingly familiar. "What makes you say that?" "Experience, I suppose." She tucked her head under his chin, breathing in his scent. "Good things have a way of disappearing when you least expect them to." Bennett's hand stilled on her back. "Is that what you're afraid of, that I'll disappear?" "Maybe," she pulled back to look at him. "Or maybe I'm afraid I'll disappear into you like I did with him, lose myself again." The morning light caught the silver in Bennett's hair as he propped himself up on one elbow, studying her face. "You're not the same person you were then," he said quietly. "And I'm not him. I know that." She reached up to touch his face, feeling the slight stubble under her fingers. But old fears don't always listen to logic. He caught her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm, a gesture that had become their private symbol of trust. "Then we'll face them together, day by day." The moment was interrupted by the buzz of Bennett's phone. His expression shifted subtly as he read the message. "The board meeting's been moved up. I need to go in early." Stella watched as he slipped back into his professional persona, efficient movements replacing the languid intimacy of moments before. It was fascinating, and a little heartbreaking, watching him armor himself for the world. "Will you be late tonight?" she asked, sitting up and wrapping the sheet around herself. "Probably." He paused in buttoning his shirt to look at her. "But I was thinking, would you like to come to the office for lunch? There's something I want to show you." The invitation surprised her. They'd kept their relationship private, both still adjusting to its reality. "Are you sure?" "Yes." He smiled slightly. "It's time you saw where I spend my days being decidedly less myself." Hawthorne Investments occupied the top 3 floors of a sleek downtown building. Stella felt slightly out of place as she stepped out of the elevator, though she'd dressed carefully in a navy silk dress that made her feel both professional and pretty. The receptionist's eyes widened slightly when Stella gave her name. Clearly, Bennett didn't make a habit of having lunch visitors. "Ms. Monroe?" a voice called from behind her. She turned to find a sharp-featured woman in her 50s approaching, with a curious expression. "I'm Victoria Nash, head of operations. Bennett asked me to show you to his office. He's running a few minutes behind." As they walked through the office, Stella noticed how the employees watched them with barely concealed interest. She wondered how many of them had ever seen inside Bennett's carefully constructed walls. His office was exactly what she'd expected: minimalist, meticulously organized, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. What surprised her was the small framed photo on his desk. Rachel, young and laughing, surrounded by the roses she'd loved. So, you're the one who's been making our CEO smile lately, Victoria said, studying Stella with shrewd eyes. We. Stella stumbled over her words, unsure how to define what they were to others. It's good, Victoria said simply. He's been alone too long. Ever since Rachel. She trailed off as Bennett appeared in the doorway. Thank you, Victoria, he said, his tone professional but warm. Something in the way the older woman squeezed his arm as she left spoke of a long-standing relationship that went beyond boss and employee. Once they were alone, Bennett's posture relaxed slightly. Sorry I'm late. The board meeting was challenging. Is everything okay? Stella moved closer, noting the tension in his shoulders. Just the usual power plays. He reached for her, then seemed to remember where they were and let his hand drop. But that's not why I asked you here. He led her to a door she hadn't noticed, hidden in the wood paneling. Inside was a small room with a single desk, a computer, and a view of Mount Rainier in the distance. What is this? She asked. Your office, if you want it. At her confused look, he continued, the publishing house lets employees work remotely 2 days a week. I thought, maybe you'd like to work here sometimes, when you want company but need your own space. Stella felt her throat tighten with emotion. It was such a perfectly Bennett gesture, practical yet deeply thoughtful, offering closeness while respecting her independence. You don't have to answer now, he added quickly, misreading her silence. I just wanted you to know it's here if... She cut him off with a kiss, not caring about the professional setting. When she pulled back, his eyes were soft with understanding. Thank you, she whispered, for seeing what I need, even when I'm not sure myself. They had lunch delivered to his office, Thai food from their favorite place near home. The word home slipped naturally into Stella's thoughts now, and she marveled at how quickly their lives had intertwined. Tell me something true, she said, as they sat on his office couch, sharing pad thai and stolen glances. It was a game they'd started playing, these requests for honesty in random moments. Bennett considered for a moment, his fingers doing their characteristic snap. I'm terrified, he admitted finally. Of what? Of how easily you've become essential. Of how much I want to give you everything while being afraid that everything isn't enough. He set down his fork, turning to face her fully. Of how much it would hurt to lose you. Stella reached for his hand, linking their fingers. Tell me, something else true. I think I'm falling in love with you. The words came out in a rush, like he couldn't hold them back anymore. And that terrifies me most of all. The city stretched out below them, Seattle's endless dance of sun and shadow playing across the buildings. In that moment, Stella felt the weight of their shared fears, their individual traumas, their cautious hopes for the future. I think I'm falling in love with you too, she whispered. And you're right, it's terrifying, but maybe that's okay. Maybe being scared together is braver than being fearless alone. Bennett pulled her closer, pressing his forehead to hers. In the distance, a fairy horn sounded, and the afternoon sun caught the silver band of her old wedding ring, still sitting on his office windowsill where she'd left it weeks ago. A reminder, not of what she'd lost, but of what she'd found the courage to leave behind. Later that night, after Bennett finally came home from his late meetings, they lay tangled together on the living room couch, the soft sounds of Chopin filling the air. Stella worked on her novel while he read through reports, their domestic, peace punctuated by comfortable silences and shared glances. Move the rest of your things in tomorrow, Bennett said suddenly, his voice soft but certain. Stella looked up from her laptop. I thought I already had. No, you left some things in the guest house just in case. His eyes met hers, understanding, and challenge mixing in their depths. Stop keeping one foot out the door, Stella. Be here fully with me. She closed her laptop, turning to face him fully. Are you sure? Once I'm all in, Bennett, I'm all in. No safety nets, no escape routes. He set aside his papers, pulling her into his lap. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. His kiss was gentle but firm, a promise sealed in touch. Bring it all, even the scary parts, the broken pieces, the doubts. Bring everything. I want all of you. That night, as Seattle's lights twinkled below their bedroom window, Stella wrote in her notebook one last time before packing it with the rest of her things. Sometimes love isn't about perfect moments or grand gestures. Sometimes it's about choosing to be scared together, about offering empty offices as sanctuaries, about saying bring everything and meaning it. Sometimes it's about finally, letting yourself believe that home isn't a place. It's a person who sees all your shadows and chooses to dance with them anyway. The annual Hawthorne Investments Charity Gala was Seattle's most prestigious corporate event, and this year, it marked Stella and Bennett's first public appearance as a couple. Standing before the full-length mirror in their bedroom, Stella smoothed the silk of her emerald evening gown, her fingers unconsciously moving to twist the ends of her honey-colored hair. "You look beautiful," Bennett said, appearing behind her in the reflection. He was devastatingly handsome in his tuxedo, though. His fingers betrayed his nerves with their characteristic snap against his thigh. "Are you sure about this?" Stella asked, meeting his eyes in the mirror. "Going public, the gossip, the questions." He wrapped his arms around her waist, pressing a kiss to her bare shoulder. "Let them talk. I'm tired of hiding the best part of my life." But they both knew it wasn't that simple. The Seattle business world was small, and rumors had already started circulating. The reclusive CEO of Hawthorne Investments living with a woman who'd shown up at his door with nothing but a suitcase? It was too juicy a story to ignore. "There will be photographers," Bennett warned as their town car approached the venue. "And Richard Chen, your main competitor." Stella had heard about Richard, a shrewd businessman known for using personal information as leverage. "He's been trying to orchestrate a hostile takeover for months." Bennett's jaw tightened. "He'll use anything he can against me, including you." Stella squeezed his hand. "Then let's give him nothing to use." The moment they stepped onto the red carpet, camera flashes erupted. Bennett's public mask slipped into place, the confident CEO, untouchable and composed. But his hand remained warm against Stella's lower back, a private anchor in the public storm. Inside the grand ballroom of the Four Seasons, Seattle's elite mingled under crystal chandeliers. Stella felt the weight of curious stares, heard the whispered conversations that stopped as they passed. "Bennett!" A sharp voice cut through the crowd. Richard Chen approached, his smile not reaching his eyes. "And this must be the mysterious woman who's captured our most eligible bachelor." "Richard?" Bennett's voice was professionally cordial but cold. "This is Stella Monroe, my partner." "Charmed?" Richard's gaze swept over Stella assessingly. "Tell me, Ms. Monroe, how does one go from homeless divorcee to CEO's girlfriend so quickly? You must share your secrets." The barb was deliberately loud enough to draw attention from nearby guests. Stella felt Bennett tense beside her, but before he could respond, she smiled graciously. "Actually, Mr. Chen, I'd love to share that story. It's about recognizing your own worth, refusing to be defined by circumstances, and finding someone who sees you for who you are, not what you can offer them." She took a sip of champagne. "But I suspect that's not the kind of business strategy you're interested in." A few onlookers chuckled, and Richard's smile tightened. "Fascinating perspective. Though I wonder if the board shares your romantic outlook on personal investments." "The board," Bennett cut in, his voice carrying a dangerous edge, "is more concerned with our 40% growth this quarter. Speaking of which, how is Vertex Corp's hostile takeover attempt of your company going?" Richard's face darkened. He nodded curtly and moved away, leaving a wake of whispers behind him. "That was perfectly handled," Bennett murmured, leading Stella to the dance floor as the orchestra began a waltz. "I learned from the best," she smiled, settling into his arms. "Though I think we just made an enemy." "He was already an enemy." Bennett's hand tightened slightly on her waist. "But he underestimated you. They all do." As they moved across the floor, Stella caught fragments of conversations around them, some admiring, some skeptical, all curious about the woman who had somehow pierced Bennett Hawthorne's carefully constructed walls. "You're 9 o'clock, Bennett whispered. "Victoria's heading off the Society columnist, and at 3 o'clock my head of PR is already spinning this as a modern fairy tale." "Is that what we are? A fairy tale?" He pulled back slightly to look at her, his blue-gray eyes intense. "No. We're something much more real, much more valuable." The music shifted to a slower song, and Stella rested her head on his shoulder, breathing in his familiar scent. "Tell me something true," she whispered, their private game a comfort in this public space. "I'm proud to be here with you," he said softly. "Proud that everyone can see who I choose to love." The word love still sent shivers down her spine. They'd been saying it more lately, each time feeling more natural than the last. Later that night, after they'd played their public roles to perfection, they escaped to the hotel suite Bennett had reserved. Stella kicked off her heels while Bennett loosened his bow tie, both of them shedding their public personas like uncomfortable clothes. "Come here," he said, pulling her onto the balcony. The Seattle skyline glittered before them, and in the distance they could just make out their home. "What are you thinking?" Stella asked, noting the thoughtful look in his eyes. "I'm thinking about Rachel." He rarely spoke of his sister anymore, but when he did, it was always significant. "She would have loved you. Would have loved seeing me happy again." Stella turned in his arms to face him. "Tell me about the day you lost her. Really tell me." Bennett was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "It was raining. Like today. I was supposed to pick her up from her art class, but there was a board meeting. The same board that still sits in judgment today." His fingers did, their nervous snap. "I called her, told her to take a taxi. She said it was fine, that she understood. That's what everyone said about Rachel. She always understood." Stella waited, letting him find his words. The taxi driver fell asleep at the wheel. They said it was instant, that she didn't suffer. His voice cracked slightly. "I spent years punishing myself, building walls, telling myself that caring too much was dangerous. And then you walked into that cafe and ordered terrible chamomile tea," Stella finished softly, making him smile despite the pain in his eyes. "You made me want to tear down every wall I'd built." He cupped her face in his hands, even knowing it could hurt, even knowing people like Richard would try to use it against me. "You made me brave enough to choose love over fear." Stella reached up to wipe a tear from his cheek. "Then let's be brave together. No more hiding. No more letting the Richards of the world make us doubt what we know is real." He kissed her then, deep and sure, the Seattle lights twinkling behind them like stars. When they broke apart, Stella shivered slightly in the cool night air, and Bennett wrapped his jacket around her shoulders. "Move in with me," he said suddenly. Stella laughed. "Bennett, I already live with you." "No." He turned her to face him fully. "Buy into the house with me. Make it ours legally, not just emotionally. Let me put your name on the deed." The offer took her breath away. It wasn't just about property. It was about equality, about Bennett ensuring she would never feel dependent or insecure again. "Are you sure?" she asked, searching his face. "The board? The press? Let them talk." He pulled her close. "I want everyone to know that you're not just sharing my life. You're building it with me. Equal partners, equal stakes, equal hearts." In their garden at home, Rachel's roses swayed in the night breeze, their white petals glowing under the moonlight. And in a luxurious hotel suite high above Seattle, two people who had once been afraid to trust love held each other and chose once again to be brave together. The morning everything changed started like any other. Stella was in their kitchen, coffee in hand, reviewing final edits for her novel when her phone buzzed with a news alert. The headline made her blood run cold. "Hawthorne Investments, CEO in crisis, leaked documents suggest family death cover-up." Below was a grainy photo of a younger Bennett leaving a police station, dated the night Rachel died. The article, published by one of Seattle's most ruthless business blogs, implied that Bennett's role in his sister's death might have been more complicated than previously reported. Stella's hand shook as she scrolled through the article. Someone had leaked selected portions of the police report, Rachel's autopsy results, and Bennett's statement, all carefully curated to paint a damning picture. The final paragraph mentioned an anonymous source claiming Bennett had been drinking the night he canceled picking up Rachel. The sound of Bennett's footsteps on the stairs made her heart race. How could she tell him? But before she could decide, his phone rang. The look on his face as he answered told her he already knew. I see. His voice was ice cold. CEO Bennett, fully in place. No, don't release any statements yet. Call an emergency board meeting. 1 hour. He ended the call and stood perfectly still, his back to her, staring out at Rachel's roses in the garden. Bennett, Stella said softly, moving toward him. Don't. The word was sharp enough to make her stop. I need to handle this. We can handle it together. He turned then, and the pain in his eyes took her breath away. There is no we in this, Stella. This is my burden, my past. That's not true. She took another step forward. Your past is part of our present. Let me help. Like you helped at the gala? His voice was bitter now. This isn't another social challenge you can charm your way through. This is my sister's death being turned into tabloid fodder. The words hit Stella like a physical blow. That's not fair. No? He ran a hand through his hair, his fingers snapping in agitation. Richard Chen's team has been digging. They found out about the drinks I had at lunch that day, about the board meeting that made me cancel on her. They're painting me as a drunk, privileged CEO who chose business over family and then covered it up. Then we'll fight it. Together. There is no together in this. His shout echoed through the kitchen. This is exactly what I was afraid of. Getting close to someone, letting them in, it just creates vulnerabilities, weapons for people to use against you. Stella felt tears threatening but forced them back. So that's it? One crisis and you shut me out? Push me away? I'm not pushing you away. I'm protecting you. No. She moved to stand directly in front of him. You're protecting yourself. You're falling back on old patterns because you're scared. Well, guess what? I'm scared too. But I'm still here. Stella, no. You need to listen. Her voice shook, but held firm. I know what it's like to have your past twisted into something ugly, to have private pain turned into public spectacle. My ex-husband made sure the whole world knew about my failures as a wife. But you know what? I survived. And you will too. But not by shutting out the people who love you. Bennett's face was a mask of controlled pain. You don't understand. If this story gains traction, if the board loses confidence, I could lose everything I've built, everything I've worked for since Rachel died. Then lose it. The words came out before she could stop them. Lose the company, lose the reputation, lose it all. I'll still be here. Will you? His voice was barely a whisper. When the press starts digging into your past too? When they paint you as the gold digger who seduced a vulnerable CEO? When every mistake you've ever made becomes headline news? Yes. She reached for his hand, and this time he didn't pull away. Because none of that matters. What matters is the truth. And the truth is I love you. The real you. Not the CEO, not the public figure, not the perfect brother who carries all this guilt. Just you. Something in his expression cracked. I never told anyone, he said, his voice breaking. That day at lunch I had 2 glasses of wine. The board meeting ran late. I thought she'd be fine taking a taxi. She always was. Always independent. Always understanding. It wasn't your fault, Stella said softly. Wasn't it? If I'd been there, then maybe you'd both be dead. Or maybe you'd both be fine. We can't live in what-ifs, Bennett. Trust. Me, I've tried. He looked at her then. Really looked at her, and some of the tension left his shoulders. How do you do that? Do what? Cut through all my defenses. Make me feel human again. She smiled slightly. The same way you do it for me. By seeing the real person behind the walls. Bennett pulled her into his arms then, holding her like she was the only solid thing in a world spinning out of control. I'm sorry, he whispered into her hair, for pushing you away, for letting fear win, even for a moment. I know. She held him tighter. But next time, remember, your burdens are our burdens now. Your fights are our fights. They stood like that for a long moment, the morning sun casting their joined shadows across the kitchen floor. Finally, Bennett pulled back slightly. The board meeting, he said. Come with me. Are you sure? Yes. His voice was stronger now. It's time they met my partner, my real partner, not just the woman from the charity gala, the one who makes me brave enough to face my past. As they prepared to leave, Stella paused by the garden doors looking at Rachel's roses. She would be proud of you, you know, not for the company or the success, but for this moment, for choosing love over fear. Bennett's hand found hers, their fingers intertwining. Tell me something true, he said, their private game now a comfort in crisis. I'm not going anywhere, Stella replied. No matter what, headlines they write, what stories they spin, I'm all in, remember? He kissed her then, soft and sure, a promise sealed in the morning light. Outside, the city waited with its challenges and accusations, its tabloid headlines and board meetings. But in their kitchen, with the scent of roses drifting in through the window, two people who had once been afraid to trust love stood together, ready to face whatever came next. Not as CEO and girlfriend, not as protector and protected, but as partners. Equal hearts facing an unequal world, choosing each other despite the cost, because of the cost beyond the cost, and in that choice lay their greatest strength. The Hawthorne Investments boardroom fell silent as Bennett and Stella entered hand in hand. 12 pairs of eyes watched them cross the expansive space, some curious, others openly hostile. Richard Chen sat at the far end, a satisfied smirk playing at his lips. Mr. Hawthorne, Board Chairman Douglas Weber began, given the serious nature of these allegations. Before we begin, Bennett interrupted, his voice steady, I'd like my partner to address the board. A murmur of surprise rippled through the room. This wasn't protocol and everyone knew it. But before anyone could object, Stella stepped forward, her honey-colored hair catching the morning light streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows. 8 years ago, she began, her voice clear and strong. A young woman named Rachel Hawthorne died in a tragic accident. Today, someone tried to turn that private tragedy into a public scandal. Her eyes found Richard's, holding his gaze. But they made one crucial mistake, as she reached into her bag and pulled out a leather-bound notebook. They underestimated the power of truth. Opening the notebook, Stella continued, For the past month, I've been interviewing people for a story. Not about business or mergers, but about love and loss. About a brother who turned his grief into purpose. I spoke to the taxi driver's widow who told me how Bennett paid for her children's college education. To the art students who receive annual scholarships in Rachel's name. To the grief counselors at the center he founded anonymously. The board members shifted uncomfortably as Stella laid out document after document. Scholarship records, foundation, papers, witness statements from the night of the accident. You see, she said, her voice softening. While you've been reading sensationalized headlines, I've been uncovering the real story. The story of a man who didn't just survive loss, he transformed it into hope for others. Bennett watched her, with a mixture of awe and love, his fingers doing their characteristic snap once before stilling. Ms. Monroe, Richard Chen cut in, his smirk fading. This is very touching, but it doesn't address the allegations about Mr. Hawthorne's drinking. Actually, it does. Stella pulled out one final document. This is a notarized statement from James Martinez, the bartender who served Bennett that day. 2 glasses of wine with lunch, 4 hours before the accident. And here's the credit card receipt showing he was at the office when the accident occurred, not drinking as your anonymous sources suggested. The boardroom erupted in whispered conversations. Chairman Weber cleared his throat. Mr. Chen, would you care to explain how you obtained the leaked documents? Richard's face darkened. I don't know what you're implying. Then let me be clear, Stella interrupted. While investigating Bennett's charitable works, I discovered something interesting. The same law firm that leaked these documents is currently defending Vertex Corp in their takeover attempt of your company, Mr. Chen. A coincidence, I'm sure. The chairman's expression hardened. Mr. Chen, I believe we need to have a separate conversation about board ethics violations. As Richard sputtered protests, Bennett finally stepped forward. Members of the board, I've never spoken publicly about the night I lost my sister, not because of guilt or secrets, but because grief is private, sacred. His hand found Stella's, drawing strength from her presence. But today, I'm choosing to break that silence. Not to defend myself, but to honor Rachel's memory, to show that love, whether for a sister, a partner, or a purpose, is stronger than fear, stronger than loss, stronger than any attempt to weaponize pain for profit. He turned to face the board fully. If you've lost confidence in my leadership, I'll step down, but I won't apologize for who I am or how I've chosen to honor my sister's memory, and I won't hide my relationship with the woman who taught me that vulnerability isn't weakness, it's the greatest strength we have. The silence that followed was broken by slow applause. Victoria Nash had risen from her seat, tears in her eyes. One by one, other board members joined her, until only Richard remained seated, his face a mask of barely contained rage. I move to dismiss the allegations as baseless, Chairman Weber declared, and to open an ethics investigation into Mr. Chen's conduct. The vote was unanimous, with Richard abstaining through clenched teeth. As they left the boardroom, victory, secured but emotions raw, Bennett pulled Stella into his private office. That notebook, he said softly. All those interviews. When did you do all that? I started the day after the gala, she admitted. I saw how Richard looked at you, how he tried to use me against you. I knew he'd try something. I just didn't know what. Bennett touched her face gently. You were preparing for battle while I was trying to shield you from it. That's what partners do, she smiled. We protect each other, even from ourselves, sometimes. He kissed her then, deep and grateful. All the words he couldn't say poured into that single gesture. When they broke apart, both slightly breathless, he rested his forehead against hers. Tell me something true, he whispered. I'm proud of us, she replied. Not just for winning, but for choosing to fight together. Later that evening, they sat in their garden, sharing wine and comfortable silence as the sun set behind the Seattle skyline. Rachel's roses swayed in the breeze, their white petals luminous in the fading light. I've been thinking, Bennett said, his fingers tracing patterns on Stella's palm, about what you said about turning pain into purpose. What about it? The novel you're writing. What if we turned it into something more? A foundation, maybe. Something to help other women rebuild their lives after leaving difficult situations. Stella turned to look at him, seeing the quiet excitement in his eyes. Like a safe haven? More than that. A place that offers housing, job training, legal support, everything you needed when you first walked into that cafe. Everything. You offered me, she said softly. Everything we could offer others. He squeezed her hand. Together. As night fell over Seattle, two people who had once been afraid to trust love sat in their garden, planning a future built not despite their past pain, but because of it. A future where every ending could become a beginning, where every loss could transform into purpose, where love wasn't just an emotion but a force for change. And in the gentle darkness, Rachel's roses stood witness to this new chapter in their story. A chapter about turning private healing into public hope, about choosing to be not just partners in love, but partners in purpose. A chapter that proved that sometimes the deepest wounds can become the strongest foundations for building something beautiful. 3 months after the board meeting showdown, Pike Street Cafe buzzed with its usual morning crowd. Bennett sat at his regular table. Their table, fingers drumming nervously on the polished wood. Victoria Nash watched him with barely concealed amusement from across the table. "You're sure this is what you want?" she asked, sliding a small velvet box across to him. "The board's still settling after everything with Richard." "I've never been more certain of anything," Bennett interrupted, opening the box to reveal a stunning emerald-cut diamond set in platinum, with small emeralds flanking either side. The gems matched the exact shade of the dress Stella had worn to the gala. "It's beautiful," Victoria smiled. "But—" Bennett's fingers did their characteristic snap. "But I want it to be perfect. She deserves perfect." "Oh, Bennett." Victoria reached across to pat his hand. "After all this time, you still don't see it, do you? She doesn't want perfect, she wants you." Across town, Stella sat in her office at Riverside Publishing, staring at her computer screen without really seeing it. Her novel was done. Really, done, and her editor had just sent the final approval email. The story of a woman finding herself, finding love, finding purpose, all wrapped in fiction thin enough to let truth shine through. Her phone buzzed with a text from Bennett. "Dinner. Tonight, the usual place?" Their usual place had become a small Italian restaurant tucked away in Pioneer Square, where the owner, Marco, treated them like family and always saved their favorite corner table. Stella smiled, typing back, "Wouldn't miss it." What Bennett didn't know was that she had news of her own. The foundation they'd dreamed up in their garden that night was becoming reality. She'd spent weeks working with lawyers, real estate agents, and social workers, putting together a proposal that would transform their vision into concrete action. The Pike Street Women's Center would offer everything they'd talked about: temporary, housing, job training, legal support, and most importantly, hope. She'd even found the perfect location, an old boutique hotel just 2 blocks from the cafe where their story began. As evening approached, Stella changed into a simple blue dress that Bennett once said brought out the gold in her hair. In their bedroom mirror, she caught sight of her reflection and smiled, remembering the broken woman who'd stood in a hotel bathroom months ago, wondering if she'd ever feel whole again. The restaurant was quiet when she arrived, just how they liked it. Marco greeted her with his usual warmth, leading her to their corner table. But instead of Bennett, she found a single red rose and a note in his precise handwriting. Where it all began. B. Her heart beating faster, Stella made her way to Pike Street Cafe. The evening crowd had thinned, leaving the space peaceful in the soft twilight. Through the window she could see Bennett at their table, looking both confident and vulnerable in a way only she got to see. The bell above the door chimed as she entered. Bennett stood, and something in his expression made her breath catch. "You look beautiful," he said softly, pulling out her chair, the same chair she'd asked to share all those months ago. "You look nervous," she replied with a gentle smile. "Tell me something true?" He reached across the table, taking her hands in his. "I am nervous, because what I'm about to say will change everything." "Bennett, let me finish," he said softly. "That day you walked in here, soaked from the rain and carrying your whole life in one suitcase, I thought I was doing you a favor by sharing my table. But the truth is, you saved me that day. You saved me from becoming just another cold, successful man who forgot how to feel." He stood, moving around the table to kneel beside her chair. The cafe had gone completely silent. "You taught me that. Love isn't weakness. It's the greatest strength we have. You showed me that being vulnerable doesn't make me less of a man. It makes me more human, more real, more me." Stella felt tears gathering as Bennett reached into his pocket. Pulling out the velvet box. "Stella Monroe," he continued, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes, "you walked into my life asking to share a table. Now I'm asking you to share everything, my name, my life, my future. Will you marry me?" The ring caught the cafe's. Soft lighting, but Stella barely saw it. All she could see was Bennett, Her Bennett, not the CEO or the public figure, but the man who cooked her dinner and played the piano badly and loved his sister's roses. Yes, she whispered, then louder. Yes. The cafe erupted in applause as Bennett slipped the ring onto her finger, but they barely heard it. Their kiss was gentle, full of promise and shared dreams. When they finally broke apart, Stella laughed, softly. I have something for you too. She pulled out a folder from her bag, handing it to him. Inside were all the papers for the Pike Street Women's Center, including the purchase agreement for the building. You did all this? Bennett asked, amazement clear in his voice. We did this, she corrected. Your vision, my work, our purpose, together. He pulled her close again, overwhelmed by how perfectly she understood him, understood them. Tell me something true, he whispered against her hair. I never thought I'd find this kind of love, she said softly. The kind that makes you stronger, braver, more yourself. One more truth? Always. I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure you never doubt it. Outside, Seattle's eternal rain had begun to fall, just as it had the day they met. But this time, instead of seeking shelter from it, they stepped out into it together, letting it baptize them into this new chapter of their story. In Bennett's office, a photograph of Rachel now sat beside one of Stella, both women's smiles seeming to approve of this unexpected happiness. And in their garden at home, white roses bloomed under the rain, their petals catching the last light of day like promises waiting to be kept. They had begun as two broken people sharing a table in a cafe. Now they were partners sharing a vision, a purpose, a love story that had grown from the ashes of their past lives into something beautiful and strong and real. And somewhere, in the space between raindrops, between heartbeats, between the words they said and the ones they didn't need, to say their future was already blooming, as certain as roses in spring, as endless as Seattle rain, as true as love that chooses to be brave. The morning of their wedding dawned clear and bright, a rare gift from Seattle's typically moody skies. In the garden where Rachel's roses bloomed, chairs were arranged in intimate circles, and fairy lights twinkled in the early morning dew. The Pike Street Cafe had catered breakfast for the small gathering of loved ones, the scent of coffee and pastries mingling with the fragrance of fresh flowers. Upstairs in their bedroom, Stella stood before the mirror, her honey-colored hair styled in soft waves, a simple white dress flowing around her like water. The dress had no train, no elaborate beading, just clean lines and elegant simplicity, like their love story. Victoria Nash appeared in the doorway, her eyes misty. The first guests are arriving, and Bennett's wearing a path in the garden, checking the roses for the 100th time. Stella smiled, touching the emerald-cut diamond on her finger. Is he doing his nervous snap? Constantly, Victoria laughed, though he stopped long enough to give me this for you. She handed Stella a small wrapped package and a note. Stella opened the note first, recognizing Bennett's precise handwriting. My love, before we say our vows, I wanted to give you something that belongs to both our past and our future. Rachel's diary. She wrote about these roses, about how gardens need both rain and sun to grow, just like love needs both joy and pain to become something real. You walked into my life on a rainy day, carrying your pain like a shield. I was carrying mine like a wall. Somehow, we learned to turn those barriers into bridges. Meet me in the garden, where the roses bloom and our future waits. Tell me something true. B. Tears threatened to ruin her makeup as Stella carefully unwrapped the package. The diary was worn leather, its pages filled with a young girl's dreams and observations. A pressed white rose marked a particular entry. Planted roses today. Bennett pretended to be annoyed, but I saw him smiling when he thought I wasn't looking. He worked so hard to seem strong, to never need anyone. But someday, someone will see through that. They'll see his heart, like I do. And when they do, these roses will bloom for their love story too. Ready? Victoria asked softly. Stella took one last look in the mirror, at the woman she'd become. Stronger, braver, more herself than she'd ever been. "Yes," she said. "I'm ready." The garden was transformed. White roses woven with fairy lights created an enchanted canopy over the gathered guests. Piano music filled the air, not the classical pieces Bennett usually played, but something original, composed just for today. And there he stood, under an arch of Rachel's roses, looking more vulnerable and more powerful than she'd ever seen him. When their eyes met, everything else faded away, the guests, the music, the whole world narrowing to just them. Marco from the Italian restaurant now ordained for the occasion began the ceremony with a smile. "We gather here today in a garden planted with love to celebrate two people who found each other on a rainy day in a cafe. Their vows were simple, honest, true." Bennett spoke first. "Stella, you walked into my life asking to share a table and ended up sharing your soul. You taught me that the greatest strength lies not in the walls we build, but in the courage to let them fall. I vow to choose you, to choose us every day, to face whatever storms come our way together, to be your partner in all things, your safe harbor in rough seas, your home in every sense of the word." Stella's voice shook with emotion as she responded. "Bennett, you saw me when I was invisible even to myself. You offered shelter without making me feel small, gave love without asking for anything in return. I vow to be your equal in all things, in strength, in vulnerability, in purpose. To remind you every day that love isn't weakness, it's the greatest power we have. To build a life with you that honors both our past and our future." As they exchanged rings, a light rain began to fall. Not the heavy storms of Seattle's winters, but a gentle spring shower that made the roses glisten and the fairy lights dance. "Tell me something true," Bennett whispered as they shared their first kiss as husband and wife. "We're just beginning," Stella answered against his lips. The celebration moved seamlessly from wedding to another momentous occasion, the grand opening of the Pike Street Women's Center. The old boutique hotel had been transformed into a haven of hope, its doors opening that very afternoon to welcome its first residents. Stella and Bennett, still in their wedding clothes, cut not just a wedding cake but also a ribbon, officially opening the center that would help other women write their own stories of rebirth and renewal. "To new beginnings," Bennett toasted, looking out at the gathered crowd of friends, family, and the center's first residents. "And to the power of love to transform pain into purpose. To shared tables and second chances," Stella added, her eyes meeting his with infinite understanding. Later that evening, after the guests had gone and the fairy lights twinkled in the growing dusk, Bennett and Stella danced alone in their garden. Her head rested on his shoulder, his arms held her close, and above them the Seattle sky painted itself in sunset colors. "Happy?" he asked, his fingers tracing patterns on her back. "Beyond words," she smiled. "Tell me something true?" "I never thought I'd have this," he admitted softly. "This kind of love, this kind of purpose, this kind of peace." "One more truth?" "Always." "We're going to change lives together," she whispered. "Not just our own, but others too. Every woman who walks through those center doors, carrying her whole life in a suitcase like I once did. They'll find what you found," he finished. "A chance to rebuild, to grow, to bloom." In the garden, Rachel's roses swayed in the evening breeze, their white petals luminous in the fading light. The old diary entry had been right. These roses had bloomed for their love story, would continue to bloom for all the love stories yet to come. And in the quiet of their first evening as husband and wife, two people who had once been afraid to trust love held each other and danced, their shadows merging in the twilight like their lives had merged, not despite their past pain, but because of it, not erasing their scars but turning them into constellations that mapped the journey home, to a table shared in a cafe on a rainy day, to a garden where roses bloomed through all seasons, to a love that had taught them both that sometimes the greatest strength lies not in standing alone, but in choosing to fall together, trusting that in the falling they would learn to fly. 2 years later, the autumn sun cast long shadows across the Pike Street Women's Center's rooftop garden, where dozens of white rose bushes, all cultivated from cuttings of Rachel's original plants, bloomed despite the cooling weather. Stella stood at the railing, watching the sunset paint Seattle's skyline in shades of golden pink, one hand resting lightly on her growing belly. "I thought I'd find you up here," Bennett's voice came from behind her. He wrapped his arms around her, his hands joining hers over their unborn daughter. "The roses needed checking?" "They always do," she smiled, leaning back against him. Just like their Aunt Rachel said, in the 2 years since their wedding, the center had helped over 200 women rebuild their lives. Each one received a small white rose bush when they moved into their own place, a living symbol of growth and renewal. The tradition had started with their first success story, a woman named Claire who'd arrived much like Stella had, with a suitcase and a broken heart. Now Claire ran the center's job training program, helping other women discover their own strength. The garden where they stood had been her idea, a place where current residents could tend the roses and find peace in nurturing new life. "Did you tell the board?" Stella asked, turning in Bennett's arms to face him. His fingers did their characteristic snap, but his smile was sure. "That I'm stepping down as CEO to focus on the foundation? Yes. Victoria will make an excellent successor. And they agreed that expanding the Women's Center initiative nationwide is a worthy next chapter for Hawthorne Investments." He tucked a strand of her honey-colored hair behind her ear. "Though I think Richard Chen might have had a small stroke when I announced it." Stella laughed, the sound carrying across the garden where small groups of women gathered, sharing stories and supporting each other. "Tell me something true?" "I've never been happier," Bennett said softly. "Watching you with these women, seeing how the center has grown, knowing our daughter will grow up understanding the power of purpose." He pressed a kiss to her forehead. "Rachel would have loved all of it." "She does," Stella said simply. "Every time these roses bloom, she's here with us." Below them, the Pike Street Cafe was closing for the day. They still had their standing Friday night dinner date at their old table, where Marco would serve them special dishes not on the menu and pretend not to notice when they stayed past closing, lost in conversation. Their original home had been transformed too. The guest house where Stella had first stayed now hosted women transitioning out of the center's main facility, a stepping stone between crisis and independence. Their garden had expanded, with Rachel's roses multiplying as if determined to spread their message of hope and renewal. "One more truth?" Bennett asked, his hand gentle on her belly where their daughter kicked. "Always. Sometimes I think about that rainy day, about how close I came to saying no when you asked to share my table." His voice was thoughtful. "One word could have changed everything." "But you didn't say no," Stella reminded him. "You chose to be brave, just like you choose it every day since." They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the garden fill with shadows and starlight. Each woman below had her own story of rain and roses, of falling and rising, of learning to trust love again. And each one carried a piece of Stella and Bennett's story with them, in the roses they tended, in the strength they found, in the second chances they embraced. "We should head home," Bennett said softly. "Your manuscript won't edit itself." Stella's second novel was nearing completion. This one about the women of Pike Street, their struggles, their triumphs, their undying hope. Like her first book, it was fiction thin enough to let truth shine through. As they made their way down through the garden, residents called out greetings. Some were new, their eyes still carrying shadows of recent pain. Others were nearly ready to leave, their steps lighter, their smiles more sure. All of them had found something here that Stella had once found in a stranger's kindness, the courage to begin again. At home, in their bedroom that night, Bennett played the piano softly while Stella worked. The piece was one he'd composed himself, a lullaby for their daughter. Like everything in their life together, it was a work in progress, growing more beautiful with each revision. "Bennett," Stella called from their bed, her laptop casting a soft glow. I know what I want to name her. He turned from the piano, catching the look in her eyes. Tell me. Rachel, Stella said softly. Rachel Rose Hawthorne. Bennett's breath caught. He crossed the room to sit beside her, his hand finding its home over their daughter. Tell me something true? She'll grow up knowing love isn't weakness, Stella whispered. That sometimes the bravest thing we can do is share our table with a stranger. That gardens need both rain and sun to grow. Through their window, Rachel's roses swayed in the night breeze, their white petals luminous under the stars. Like love, like hope, like the endless cycle of renewal they represented, they bloomed on, season after season, story after story, heart after heart. And in their gentle persistence, they whispered the truth that Stella and Bennett had discovered that rainy day in a cafe, that sometimes the end of one story is just the beginning of a better one. You just have to be brave enough to turn the page. Have you ever had a moment in your life when, like Stella, you had to start again from scratch? That moment when all seemed lost, but a kind gesture or a special person completely changed your story? What was your journey of overcoming? Your participation in the channel is very important. Please leave your opinion in the comments. Thank you very much for watching to the end. If you liked the story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a like and share your opinion in the comments. Your participation is very important to us. See you next time.